During World War II, families across Europe and America discovered something the modern food system desperately wants you to forget. Certain crops, once planted, produce food year after year without replanting, without purchasing new seeds, and without depending on anyone or anything except soil and sunlight. These 15 perennial vegetables fed families through the darkest years of the 20th century. They survived bombings, rationing, and the complete collapse of normal food supplies. Some produced harvests for 30 years from a single planting. Then the war ended. Industrial agriculture took over. Seed companies realized they couldn't profit from crops that never needed replanting. And one by one, these remarkable plants vanished from gardens, seed catalogs, and human memory, until now. These are the 15 perennial crops that still feed families forever, and the disturbing reasons why we stopped growing them. Number 1. Jerusalem artichoke. The first crop on our list earned a powerful nickname during World War II. German-occupied Europe called it the war tuber because it grew where nothing else would survive and produced food when every other crop failed. Jerusalem artichoke is neither from Jerusalem nor an artichoke. It belongs to the sunflower family, growing tall stalks topped with yellow flowers while producing clusters of knobby tubers underground. Those tubers multiply every year, spreading through the soil and increasing your harvest without any effort on your part. The plant tolerates drought, poor soil, and complete neglect. Bomb-damaged ground that couldn't support potatoes produced abundant Jerusalem artichokes. Families who planted a few tubers in 1940 were still harvesting from the same patch in 1950 and beyond. Nutritionally, these tubers provide iron, potassium, and B vitamins while containing inulin instead of starch, making them suitable for diabetics. The prebiotic fiber feeds beneficial gut bacteria in ways modern nutritional science is only beginning to understand. So why did we stop growing them? Two reasons dominate. First, inulin causes significant digestive gas in many people, earning the tuber an embarrassing reputation. Second, after the war ended, Jerusalem artichokes became associated with poverty and deprivation. People wanted to forget the desperate years, and they forgot the foods that sustained them too. The tubers remain available from specialty nurseries, waiting for gardeners ready to plant once and harvest forever. Number 2, rhubarb. Every victory garden in Britain included rhubarb, and the reason was simple. When sugar rationing made fruit preserves nearly impossible and imported fruits vanished from markets, rhubarb provided the tangy sweetness that families craved from a plant requiring absolutely zero annual maintenance. Rhubarb produces thick red and green stalks from a permanent crown that lives 15 to 20 years or longer. Once established, you simply harvest stalks each spring, and the plant returns stronger the following year. No replanting, no seed purchasing, no dependence on supply chains that might collapse at any moment. The stalks emerge early in spring, when other crops haven't even sprouted, providing fresh produce during the hungry gap between winter stores and summer harvests. Mixed with precious sugar rations, rhubarb became pies, crumbles, jams, and sauces that reminded families of better times while helping them survive difficult ones. Nutritionally, rhubarb delivers impressive vitamin K and vitamin C, along with fiber and antioxidants. The leaves are toxic and must never be eaten, but the stalks provide genuine nutritional value alongside their culinary appeal. Modern decline came from changing tastes and supermarket convenience. Year-round imported fruits made seasonal rhubarb seem unnecessary. Health trends against sugar made naturally tart rhubarb less appealing. Younger generations never learned to prepare it, but in gardens where grandparents planted rhubarb decades ago, the crowns still produce every spring, feeding new generations from plantings made before they were born. Number 3, Asparagus. If you want a crop that truly demonstrates the meaning of planting once and harvesting forever, asparagus stands without equal. A properly established asparagus bed produces spring spears for 20 to 30 years from a single planting, requiring nothing except annual harvesting and occasional weeding. During World War II, established asparagus beds became treasured assets in victory gardens and British allotments. While annual vegetables demanded seeds, labor, and attention that wartime conditions made scarce, asparagus simply appeared each spring, regardless of what else was happening in the world. The plant demands patience during establishment. You must wait 2 to 3 years after planting before taking your first harvest. But once that waiting period ends, you receive decades of production in return. 6 to 8 weeks of daily harvests each spring, enough to eat fresh and preserve for later, all from ground you planted years ago. Asparagus delivers folate, vitamins A, C, E, and K, plus chromium for blood sugar regulation. The spears contain a unique amino acid called asparagine, discovered in this very plant and essential for human brain function. Home asparagus growing declined because modern gardeners lack patience for the establishment period. Supermarket asparagus seems cheap until you calculate the decades of free harvests a home bed provides. Those who inherit established beds from previous generations understand the true value of what perennial planting creates. Number 4, horseradish. Some crops refuse to die regardless of how hard you try to kill them. Horseradish belongs in this category, producing pungent roots from any piece of root left in the soil and spreading with determination that borders on aggression. During World War II, horseradish served double duty as food and medicine. When pharmaceutical supplies ran short, families turned to traditional remedies their grandparents had used. Horseradish root cleared sinuses, fought infections, and provided vitamin C during winter months when fresh produce was unavailable. As a condiment, it added flavor to bland wartime rations when imported spices had disappeared from markets. The plant requires essentially nothing from the gardener except harvesting. Plant a root piece in any corner of your property, and it will establish itself permanently. Dig roots whenever needed, and more will grow to replace what you took. Many gardeners actually struggle to remove horseradish once established, because any fragment left behind regenerates into a new plant. The root contains glucosinolates, the same cancer-fighting compounds found in broccoli and cabbage, along with natural antibiotic properties that traditional medicine exploited long before modern pharmaceuticals existed. Commercial availability and modern medicine made homegrown horseradish seem unnecessary. The invasive reputation frightened gardeners unfamiliar with its vigor. But for families wanting a permanent supply of medicine and flavoring that requires no care whatsoever, horseradish remains unmatched among perennial crops. Number 5, walking onions. Imagine an onion that plants itself. You harvest bulbs while the plant simultaneously creates new plants without any human intervention. This describes walking onions, perhaps the most remarkable self-perpetuating vegetable ever developed. Walking onions produce small bulbs at the top of their stalks instead of flowers. These top sets grow heavy, bend the stalk to the ground, and root wherever they touch soil. The plant literally walks across your garden over successive years, establishing new plants as it goes. You never need to save seeds, purchase starts, or replant. The onion handles its own propagation entirely. During World War II, walking onions provided complete independence from seed supply chains. Allotment gardeners shared divisions freely because the plants produced endless surplus. Every part is edible. The green tops work like scallions, the underground bulbs taste like shallots, and the top sets pickle beautifully or can be used fresh. The flavor falls milder than regular onions, making walking onions versatile in cooking. More importantly, they provide fresh allium flavor during seasons when stored onions have sprouted and new ones haven't matured. These remarkable plants disappeared from common cultivation simply because commercial onions became cheap and abundant. Garden centers stopped carrying walking onions because nobody asked for them. Knowledge of their existence faded until only dedicated seed savers maintained living collections. Today, permaculture communities are rediscovering what wartime gardeners knew about plants that maintain themselves. Number 6. Sorrel. When winter finally releases its grip and spring arrives, most gardens offer nothing to harvest. Annual vegetables haven't sprouted. Stored produce has dwindled or spoiled. This hungry gap between seasons threatened families during World War II, until they rediscovered sorrel, a perennial green that pushes through the soil earlier than almost anything else. Sorrel produces arrow-shaped leaves with a distinctive tangy lemon flavor from a permanent clump that returns every spring for 5 to 7 years or longer. French cuisine never forgot sorrel, using it in the classic soupe à l'ossé that sustained peasants and aristocrats alike. British Victory Gardens rediscovered this forgotten green when imported produce disappeared and local vegetables hadn't yet matured. The vitamin C content made sorrel particularly valuable during rationing. Scurvy, the vitamin C deficiency disease most people associate with ancient sailors, threatened wartime populations with limited fruit access. Sorrel's abundant vitamin C prevented this danger while providing fresh greens when families desperately needed them. You harvest sorrel by cutting leaves, and the plant responds by producing more. This cut and come again cycle continues from early spring through fall frost, providing months of harvest from a permanent planting. Modern decline came partly from exaggerated concerns about oxalic acid and partly from spinach becoming the supermarket standard. Sorrel doesn't ship well, so commercial production never developed. But for home gardeners, few perennials offer such reliable, early, and abundant harvests. Number 7. Good King Henry. The name sounds like something from a fairy tale, but Good King Henry fed real families for centuries before modern agriculture decided it was obsolete. This triple-purpose perennial produces edible leaves like spinach, edible shoots like asparagus, and edible seeds that can be ground into flour, all from a single permanent planting. Medieval peasants across Europe grew Good King Henry in cottage gardens, where it required no care beyond occasional harvest. The tradition continued in remote areas until World War II, when food shortages revived interest in forgotten crops that didn't demand annual replanting or purchase seeds. The plant tolerates shade and poor soil that would defeat most vegetables. Once established, a clump of Good King Henry produces for 10 years or longer without any attention from the gardener. Spring shoots, blanched under pots to keep them tender, provide asparagus-like spears. Summer leaves cook like spinach. Fall seeds offer protein and carbohydrates. Iron content made Good King Henry valuable for treating anemia when proper medical care was unavailable. The plant's ability to produce 3 distinct food types from one planting made it extraordinarily valuable when every calorie mattered. By the mid-20th century, Good King Henry had vanished from seed catalogs and common knowledge. Spinach industries, asparagus farms, and grain production made this humble triple-purpose plant seem unnecessary. Heritage seed organizations now preserve what nearly became extinct, offering modern gardeners a crop that truly does everything. Number 8. Sea kale. Victorian aristocrats considered sea kale among the finest vegetables available, paying premium prices for the blanched white shoots that appeared on wealthy tables each spring. By World War II, this luxurious perennial had become almost forgotten until coastal communities remembered it grew wild on beaches and could be cultivated in any garden. Sea kale naturally grows along European Atlantic coastlines, tolerating salt spray and sandy soil that nothing else survives. The blanching process that creates tender white shoots requires only covering the emerging growth with a pot or bucket to exclude light. What emerges is delicate, slightly nutty, and was once compared favorably to the finest asparagus. The plant provides 3 edible harvests. Blanched spring shoots offer the primary crop. Young leaves work in salads or cooked. Flower buds can be eaten like broccoli before they open. This triple harvest comes from a permanent planting that lives 15 to 20 years. Sailors historically valued sea kale for its vitamin C content, preventing scurvy on long voyages when fresh produce was impossible to obtain. The same nutritional value sustained families during wartime rationing when imported fruits had disappeared. Modern gardeners rarely encounter sea kale because it takes 2 to 3 years to establish, and the blanching process seems complicated to those unfamiliar with it. But permaculturists and gourmet gardeners are rediscovering this Victorian delicacy that sustains families for decades from a single planting. Number 9. Lovage. When rationing eliminated imported celery from British markets during World War II, gardeners turned to an ancient herb that made celery seem small and insignificant by comparison. Lovage grows 6 to 7 feet tall, produces hollow stems with intense celery flavor, and returns from the same root for 10 to 15 years without replanting. One lovage plant provides enough celery-flavored leaves, stems, and seeds to supply an entire family for an entire year. The medieval herb gardens that preserved lovage through centuries understood its value. Modern gardeners forgot it existed until wartime necessity revived traditional knowledge. Every part of lovage is useful. Young leaves flavor soups, stews, and salads with concentrated celery taste. Hollow stems can be eaten directly or used as drinking straws that flavor beverages. Seeds provide celery-like seasoning for breads and pickles. Even the root is edible when cooked, though this kills the plant. Medicinally, lovage served as a digestive aid and diuretic when pharmaceutical supplies ran short. The essential oils possess genuine therapeutic properties that traditional herbalists had exploited for centuries before modern medicine dismissed them. Commercial celery production made lovage seem unnecessary after the war. The intense flavor surprised people expecting mild celery, and unfamiliarity bred rejection. The massive size intimidates gardeners with small plots. But anyone with the space for this giant herb gains permanent access to celery flavor without annual planting or continuous purchasing. Number 10. Groundnut. Before European colonization, Native American communities cultivated a remarkable vine that produced both starchy tubers and protein-rich beans from the same plant. Groundnut, also called hopness or American potato bean, provided complete nutrition from a perennial that returned stronger every year. The tubers contain 3 times the protein of regular potatoes, along with iron, calcium, and a complete amino acid profile rare in plant foods. The beans add additional protein. The nitrogen-fixing roots improve soil fertility. All of this comes from a permanent planting that requires no annual seeds, no fertilizer, and minimal care. During World War II, foragers in Eastern American forests harvested wild groundnuts when cultivated crops proved insufficient. Some gardeners brought tubers into victory gardens, establishing productive patches that outlasted the war itself. Groundnut asks for patience. The first year produces little harvest. The second year improves. By the third year, chains of tubers spread through the soil, providing abundant yields indefinitely. The vine needs support like pole beans, climbing fences, or trellises while decorating them with fragrant purple flowers. Why did groundnut never become a major crop? Colonial agriculture ignored Native American food traditions, favoring familiar European crops. The slow establishment period discouraged farmers wanting quick returns. No commercial infrastructure developed. But as interest in perennial agriculture grows, groundnut increasingly appears in permaculture designs as the protein-producing tuber that modern farming forgot. Number 11, skirret. Before sugar became cheap and abundant, people craved natural sweetness wherever they could find it. Skirret, a cluster-rooted perennial vegetable, provided the sweetest root crop available and graced Tudor banquet tables alongside roasted meats. By World War II, it had nearly vanished, but survived in scattered heritage gardens where old traditions persisted. The plant produces clusters of finger-sized white roots rather than a single taproot. These clusters divide easily for propagation, meaning one plant becomes many without purchasing seeds. The flavor is remarkably sweet, often compared to parsnips, but distinctly sweeter, earning skirret a place in invalid diets where gentle, digestible foods were prescribed. Medieval gardeners considered skirret essential. Renaissance herbals praised its virtues. Candied skirret roots appeared as confections when sugar was precious. The sweetness comes from natural sugars concentrated in roots that can remain in the ground through winter and be harvested as needed. Skirret disappeared for practical reasons. A woody core runs through older roots, requiring removal during preparation. The small root size makes harvesting tedious compared to larger vegetables. Sugar beets and cane sugar made natural root sweetness unnecessary. Carrots and parsnips dominated commercial markets. Heritage seed organizations preserve skirret for gardeners, willing to revive forgotten traditions. The sweetness that delighted Tudor nobles remains available to modern families, willing to plant once and harvest this unusual root for generations afterward. Number 12, Scorzonera. While British and American gardeners have largely forgotten Scorzonera, continental Europe never stopped growing this black-skinned root vegetable that produces harvests for years from a single planting. German families called it winter asparagus and relied on it during World War II when stored roots provided nutrition through freezing months. Scorzonera grows long taproots covered in dark, almost black skin. Beneath that unusual exterior lies creamy white flesh with a delicate flavor often compared to oysters or artichokes. The roots can be harvested in the first year, but grow larger and sweeter in subsequent years, rewarding patience with increasingly abundant harvests. The plant's perennial nature means you can harvest roots as needed while leaving others to continue growing. Unlike annual root vegetables that must be harvested and stored, Scorzonera stores itself perfectly in the soil, remaining fresh and ready until you dig it. Nutritionally, Scorzonera provides inulin, the same prebiotic fiber found in Jerusalem artichokes, along with iron, potassium, and vitamins. Diabetics particularly valued it because inulin doesn't spike blood sugar the way starch does. British and American gardeners abandoned Scorzonera because the black skin stains hands during peeling, and the white sap is sticky and messy. Parsnips seemed easier, but in Germany, Belgium, and France, Scorzonera never disappeared from kitchen gardens or market stalls. The perennial root that sustained European families through war remains available for anyone willing to rediscover it. Number 13, Turkish rocket. Some of the most valuable food plants arrived not through intentional introduction, but as refugees brought seeds from their homelands. Turkish rocket came to Britain with Eastern European immigrants and naturalized so successfully that many people now consider it a weed rather than the perennial vegetable it actually is. The plant produces leaves and flower buds, with flavor combining broccoli and mustard, providing brassica nutrition from a permanent planting that never needs replanting. During World War II, foragers recognized Turkish rocket growing on roadsides and wasteland, harvesting free greens when cultivated vegetables were scarce. Turkish rocket emerges early in spring, when overwintered plants push out new growth before annual brassicas have even been planted. And this early harvest fills the hungry gap when winter stores are exhausted and summer gardens haven't yet produced. The plant continues producing through summer if flower stalks are regularly harvested. Like all brassicas, Turkish rocket contains glucosinolates, the sulfur compounds that give broccoli and cabbage their cancer-fighting properties. The same nutritional benefits come packaged in a plant that refuses to die and requires zero annual effort. The aggressive spreading that makes Turkish rocket ecologically concerning in some regions makes it impossibly productive in contained garden settings. What some consider a weed, others recognize as a perennial broccoli, requiring no replanting, no purchased seeds, and no attention beyond harvest. The crop that arrived with refugees still awaits recognition from mainstream gardening. Number 14, 9-star broccoli. Annual broccoli produces one harvest, then dies. 9-star broccoli, developed in 19th century England, produces multiple small heads for 3 to 5 years from a single planting if managed correctly. During World War II, established plants provided spring vegetables without the labor, seeds, and inputs that annual broccoli demanded. The plant produces up to 9 small cauliflower-like heads, rather than one large head. Harvest these before they flower, and the plant produces more. Prevent flowering entirely, and the perennial habit continues year after year. Allow even one head to flower and set seed, and the plant considers its job complete and dies. This management requirement explains why 9-star broccoli nearly vanished from cultivation. Gardeners who didn't understand the flowering issue lost their plants after a single year and concluded the perennial claims were false. Those who harvested diligently enjoyed years of production from plants that should have needed replacing annually. Thompson and Morgan listed 9-star broccoli throughout the war years, and allotment associations promoted it as a labor-saving perennial alternative to annual brassicas. The heads offer mild, sweet broccoli flavor, with none of the bitterness that sometimes affects annual varieties. Heritage seed companies, particularly Real Seeds in the UK, preserve 9-star broccoli for gardeners willing to learn its requirements. Understanding that you must harvest before flowering transforms an apparently difficult crop into a reliable perennial that justifies its place in any permanent food garden. Number 15, cardoon. The final crop on our list towers above everything else in the garden. Cardoon grows 5 to 8 feet tall, producing massive silvery leaves that make it as ornamental as it is edible. Related to artichokes but hardier and more productive, cardoon fed Mediterranean families through World War II and continues feeding those who remember how to grow it. Italian families traditionally serve cardoon at Christmas Eve dinner. The blanched stalks braised in olive oil or baked in gratins. French and Spanish cuisine feature it prominently. The preparation involves blanching, wrapping the stalks to exclude light, and create tender, pale growth without the bitterness that unblanched stalks develop. The plant's size means significant production from minimal plants. 2 or 3 cardoons supply a family's needs through the winter months when fresh vegetables are scarce. The roots survive freezing and return each spring, eliminating replanting forever in zones 7 and warmer. Nutritionally, cardoon contains cynarin, the same compound that makes artichokes beneficial for liver health. High fiber content, potassium, and magnesium add additional value. The substantial stalks provide genuine sustenance rather than merely flavoring. Cardoon disappeared from gardens outside Mediterranean communities because the blanching process seemed exotic and complicated. The space requirements deterred small garden growers. Artichoke hearts in cans made the work unnecessary. But families who maintain cardoon traditions enjoy a perennial vegetable that produces abundantly with minimal effort once established and understood. 15 perennial crops that fed families through the worst years of the 20th century. 15 plants that produce harvests year after year without replanting, without purchasing seeds, without depending on supply chains that might collapse tomorrow. Every single one of these crops disappeared from mainstream gardening for the same fundamental reasons. Seed companies cannot profit from crops that never need replanting. Supermarkets cannot sell produce that families grow themselves permanently. Industrial agriculture cannot mechanize harvests from permanent plantings that spread and persist on their own terms. The food system that replaced wartime victory gardens was designed for corporate profit, not family resilience. And we accepted it because we wanted to forget the hard years and embrace convenience. But convenience comes at a cost. Dependence on annual seeds means dependence on companies that sell them. Reliance on supermarket produce means vulnerability when supply chains fail. Forgetting how to grow perennial crops means forgetting how to feed ourselves forever. These 15 crops still exist. The seeds are still available. The knowledge to grow them has been preserved by dedicated gardeners who refuse to let it die. Now, you know what they know. Subscribe for more forgotten knowledge that the modern world wants you to ignore. Share this video with anyone ready to plant once and harvest forever.